Hello, the recording you're about to listen to was recorded in Doylestown at the 2023 Doylestown Spiritual Banquet Conference hosted by the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, which meets at St. Paul's Lutheran Church every Saturday night, 8 p.m. food and fellowship, 8:30 speaker. Please look for us on YouTube at the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown and our Facebook page, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. Anyway, look forward to seeing you. Hope you enjoy these recordings. They were very powerful and lives were changed there. Please take advantage of them and share them with whoever you think could benefit from their talks. Thank you very much.
Get ready.
What's that?
No, for people listening on YouTube, say there's nothing like being here in person.
Oh, for you listening on YouTube, there's nothing like being here in person. And I'm not going to adjust the microphone because... Do what? Yeah, it's all jokes. What is green and hangs from trees? Giraffe snot. You didn't like that one. Okay, so we're gonna close it off with Jimmy A. And Jimmy is one of my spiritual brothers, my big brother, my sidekick, and a wonderful human being who eats, lives, drinks, and breathes Step 12. So here's Jimmy A.
Boom. All right. All right, buddy, I'm Jimmy, an alcoholic. You might remember me. I was up here about 12 hours ago. I had hair on my head and no beard. Put the microphone up. All right. Oh. There we go. Oh, what a great day this has been, right? This is like you guys are the real alcoholics because you're at the end. This is like the after hours crew, right? The lights are blinking, last drink, get out. No, one more, just give me one more. And my people. Where am I going to go here? Wonderful speakers. No more steps. I can't step on anyone now like everyone stepped on me. And that's funny because, I thought the steps were linear when I first came here. You do one, check it off, and you're good to go. 2, 3, check, and you're done. And what we heard today, and what I know from my own personal experience, is that how these steps are just so intertwined into each other. And as we stay here a long time, you just really see how this unfolds. So again, my name is Jimmy. I'm an alcoholic. I'm sober since March 28, 1987. I've had so many different experiences with Step 12, and I started the day off by that little reading of Bill in Towns Hospital sitting with Silkworth, and he cried out, "Am I insane?" And look where we've come throughout the day. 6 hours later, 7 hours later, we've had a spiritual experience. We've stepped into the sunlight of the Spirit. That happened after 9. Now have full acknowledgement that God is doing for us what we can never do for ourselves. It's the key to the door to the sunlight of the Spirit. We look at 10, we look at 11, we look at 12, and those are the 3 steps that I truly believe are the things that keep us out into the sunlight of the Spirit. But due to the fact we're human, all trying to live on a spiritual walk, we're going to fail at this daily. We're going to make our mistakes. We're human. My sponsor says it all the time. We're human beings on a spiritual walk. Sometimes we lose focus of the spiritual walk. But we get an opportunity with the spot check inventory, like Sarah, what Peter talked about with prayer and meditation. and now more importantly, of carrying this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So the key word I believe in 12 is we try. Because none of us had the power to get anyone sober. None of us had the power to get anyone drunk. Right? There was a time in Alcoholics Anonymous early on, I had a secret. You might have this secret if you're sitting here today. But what I've come to find out, it's really a delusion. Peter said it earlier, my alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle, it comes in my mind. And my mind is filled with a lot of delusions about a lot of things. And one of the biggest delusions, I believe, is that God's not going to help a guy like me. The delusion of spiritual disqualification. Now, I've been through the steps numerous times through the years. I've read more inventory to all my sponsors. I've made all my amends. I stand here today absolutely with not one outstanding amends that I'm aware of that's out there that I need to make. I do nighttime inventory on a daily basis for I don't know how many years. I pray, I meditate, I do service work, I do a lot of the stuff we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I put on events like this all the time. I do a lot of things. And I don't say that for an attaboy or a pat on the back. I say that for one reason and only one reason. There's still a little part of me sometimes, deep down inside me. That 10-year-old little boy is still there, who's still driven by a 1960 religious belief system that I'm going to go to hell for everything I've ever done. Now that sounds utterly ridiculous when I say it, but sometimes I believe that lie. I believe that delusion. And sometimes what I can't understand is that I don't have purpose. We have three purposes in Alcoholics Anonymous: primary purpose, singleness of purpose, and real purpose. And we all know that real purpose is to fit ourselves to be a maximum service to God and to each other, right? To help God's kids. And what I couldn't see is that I've been of purpose since day one. Since day one. And this is the importance of sponsorship, because I think we have a responsibility as a sponsor. When we're holding that man's hands, before we give him to God's hands, we have to show him that you are being of purpose. Because we're blind when we come in here. It's this disease of perception. It's like I'm a horse in a horse race. I got those blinders on. I can't see anything. I can only see straight ahead. And see, I need men in my life that can really guide me and show me and tell me about things that I am doing right, Alcoholics Anonymous. Because as we heard all day long, we're our own worst critics. Right? I don't need to beat you up. I beat myself up enough. Right? So some of the things that I did, I come from an age in Alcoholics Anonymous, I think it's a lost age, and I know, like Peter knows, I know there's a couple of you older guys in here. 12-step calls used to be a common practice in my neighborhood. There was a time in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I know a lot of the treatment centers took away that kind of stuff, but there was a time in Alcoholics Anonymous where I'm a couple of months sober, maybe even a year sober, where my sponsor would call me up and just say, be downstairs in 10 minutes. It could be 11 o'clock at night, it could be 1 o'clock in the morning. And you never really questioned it. Okay. It wasn't like, oh, Richie, I got to go to work tomorrow. No. He said 10 minutes downstairs. You're 10 minutes, you're downstairs. That's just the way it was. And what would happen is he'd be outside in his car, he'd be with another old-timer, and then he would grab a young kid like me and another young kid. And they'd tell us that we're going on a 12-step call to go try to carry the message to a guy that's still loaded. And we would show up at this guy's house, and we all had firm instructions. Well, I had firm instructions. My instructions for that particular 12-step call might be, go make sure there's no weapons laying around the house. Make sure there's no guns or knives or anything like that. The other kid, go check on the kids. Go check on the wife. Make sure everyone's safe. And then what would happen from that point, we'd walk into the living room, and the drunk would be sitting on the couch, sitting on the floor, sitting in there somewhere. And then we'd watch those two old-timers. And then the magic would happen. And the magic would happen is all they did was tell their stories to the alcoholic. And at the end of that talk, they would both say to him, do you want help? And back then in the 80s, we didn't have as many treatment centers. There was very few detoxes. Most of the detoxes in northern New Jersey were our local hospitals. There wasn't all these fancy places that are around today. And we never brought that guy to a detox, and we never brought that guy really to a treatment center. Very rare occasion, unless he was in serious help, we would take him to a hospital. Where do we bring them? We bring them to you. We bring them to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we put them in one of those bad metal chairs. We give them a half a cup of coffee, and we watch them shake for that hour. And on some occasions, which was really shocking to me in the beginning, was they would carry a pint of whiskey in the car. So he wouldn't go into withdrawals or DTs or, into a violent, seizure or any of that nature. And at the end, we would ask him, are you ready to go to a meeting tomorrow? And again, I don't understand this as having some kind of purpose. I got that job in the airport that I talked about this morning. I had it for a few months. I ain't hardly any money, but I bought my first car. I bought a 1963 powder blue Volkswagen Bug. Can you imagine me driving that car? And my sponsor says, you have a car now. Go pick up, guys. Purpose. You have purpose. Get a commitment in the group. Make coffee. You have purpose. Set up the chairs. You have purpose. Break down the chairs. You got purpose. Clean up the kitchen. You got purpose. I needed to keep on being reminded that we have a purpose here. And we have a reason why we do the things we do in here. Day 7. I'm sober 7 days in my new home group with a new sponsor, with all these new friends. I don't know what the hell is going on. I'm still, I'll use an old AA term. I don't even know if you can Google this word, mocus. I'm mocus. I am still shot out. And I'm at a AA business meeting. Yippee! Yippee! Oh, I'm so excited to be there. And Richie runs up to me all doing jumping jacks and happy. He was my sponsor. This is the guy that 12-stepped me in the airport that day. He goes, I want you to take the job as the ashtray cleaner. And in my mind, I'm like, you're out of your mind. I'm not doing that. And I had a perfectly good reason. Though I didn't say it to him, I had a perfectly good reason. Because right up to this day, I have never smoked a cigarette in my life. So why do I have to clean ashtrays? I didn't understand that he was trying to give me a responsibility. He was trying to give me a job in Alcoholics Anonymous. But what I could tell you is this. From that day, on day 7, to this moment, standing right here, right now, I've been tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous through a position, through a job, through a commitment. Whether it's been in my home group, whether it's been in my district, whether it's been in my area, I've been involved in the third legacy of service for a long time, trying to carry the message to the best of my ability to the person who still suffers. I'm 18 months sober. I'm starting to have my doubts about Alcoholics Anonymous. Not so much doubts about AA, but you know how we get. I'm that type of guy that when I came into AA, everything came back really fast. My health came back. Physically, I came back. I don't know about emotionally or spiritually, but, I got back with that wife that I walked out on. I had those 2 little AA babies. I got a house. I got a union job. I started to have money in my pocket. Everything looked good. So maybe, not that I overreacted, but do I really need to invest in this thing called recovery in AA? It seems from my angle that I'm doing pretty good, that maybe I don't need to go to AA. And these are just my dark thoughts in my mind without talking to my sponsor about it, talking to you guys about it. And I walked into my parents' home one day, and I found my father dead. He was dead on the floor. I'm 18 months sober. But I'm programmed, you see, because I'm going to a lot of meetings. I have a sponsor. I'm listening to what they're trying to say to me, and I'm doing a lot of 12-step calls. So, I call my sponsor up and I tell him what happened. My dad's dead on the floor. He's 63 years old, almost 3 years younger than I am now. He says, let's pray and call 911. So we pray over the phone. I call 911 and we start to pray. First cop shows up. The cop's taking down the information. He goes, hey, I don't see you walking the streets anymore. I said, yeah, I don't do that anymore. Like I said earlier, I was on the streets for 18, 19 months, living homeless on the streets of northern New Jersey. Taking a little bit more information. After that, after a couple of seconds, he looks at me, a minute, so he looks at me and goes, I don't see you in the bars anymore, drinking anymore. I said, yeah, I don't do that anymore. And he goes, well, how do you do that? And I start to talk about you guys. I start to talk about Alcoholics Anonymous and how I'm staying sober, going to these meetings. And he starts to ask me a few questions, and before you know it, he starts to be a little bit more inquisitive. And I am so locked in on 12-step calls and questions that I see this cop is asking me for help. And I wind up 12-stepping this cop over my dead father's body. Now, why I tell you that is this reason. Last January, I'm in my home group down on the Jersey Shore. I haven't seen this cop since that day. Well, I might have seen him a few times in meetings afterwards because he came to Alcoholics Anonymous. But I'm in my home group, and we're huddling around talking about probably the Giants beating the Eagles again. And I get a tap on my shoulder, and when I turn around, it's the cop who's now retired. He came to find me to let me know that he just celebrated 34 years of sobriety. Now, I don't tell you that for a pat on the back. I don't tell you that for any reason. Like I said, I can't get anyone drunk. I can't get anybody sober. But I want to tell you that God will use you without your permission, even in the darkest of times, because we have purpose. An experience you should not miss, working with others. And thank God that Bill didn't buy into that delusion. Because Bill could have just said, you know what, I had that white light experience that I read, I got mine, I'm going home to Brooklyn, and me and Lois are just going to start a life. But thank God Bill didn't think like that. And Marion said it earlier. On page 14 and 15, we got some of the greatest promises that are in this book. I always thought it was just the 12 promises after the 9th step, but really there's 225 promises, all as a direct result of action. And thank God Bill didn't think that when he said after that white light experience, while I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given me. Perhaps I could work with some of them. They in turn might work with others. That's why Silkworth writes about the altruistic movement, the selfless concern for others. Bill witnessed it. Silkworth witnessed it through Bill, of trying to carry the message to the best of his ability, even though, like it says in the doctor's opinion, we're not too sure about it, but we consented. We let him tell the story. Maybe this will help to cut the hopeless alcoholic. Later on, he goes on page 15. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problem. It was fortunate. Think of that word, fortunate. It was fortunate for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I had found little work. He didn't look at that like self-pity or I'm not working, I don't have money. He thought it was a great thing to happen for him, that he was fortunate to be placed in a position of being of use, of having purpose, of helping others. Our first H&I committee ever in Alcoholics Anonymous. We got a friend, Harold, whose old sponsor was a guy by the name of Tom Iverster. Some of you guys might have heard Tom I. Tom I was an all-time AA member that just died last year with 68 years of sobriety. If you can get a hold of his tapes, I would listen to his tapes. Tom I killed 2 people when he was 24 years old, I believe, 23, 24 years old in a car accident, vehicular homicide. He did 4 years in a prison system down in North Carolina. When he got out, he got involved in H&I, carrying the message to the alcoholics and to prison systems. He started to bring meetings into the prison systems. Tom eventually became the warden of the prison that he was in. The law in the United States is you can't do that anymore. But Tom would always say this when he told his talk. If you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, make sure you take a commitment to a place that you never wind up again. Carry the message into our prison systems, carry the message into treatment centers, carry a message into the detoxes, carry the message to your doctor through a PI commitment. This is what AA is, what AA isn't. Carry the message to your clergy. We have ample opportunities to carry the message. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Well, what's a spiritual experience? Sounds like I said early on, stepping out into the light, stepping into the sunshine, the sunlight of the Spirit. I think Peter mentioned being a free man, being able to go anywhere on this earth, a free man, not being in bondage with alcoholism, right? But I love Bill's writings, and I think in the 12 and 12 he gives the best explanation of a spiritual experience. He talks about when a man or woman has a spiritual awakening, experience, psychic change, personality change. You guys fill in the blanks. The most important meaning of that is now he has now become able to do, feel, and believe which he cannot do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift. Remember what I said earlier? What did it feel like before the day before day one? Think about that. And now you're giving me a gift of sobriety? Now I got this precious gift, which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. He has been set on a path, which tells him he's really going somewhere. That life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, he has been transformed from the inside to the outside. Because he has laid hold of a source of strength, God, which in one way or another he has until now denied himself. He finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, usefulness, peace of mind, and love, which he had thought himself quite incapable. What he has received is a free gift. And yet, usually at least in some small part, he has made himself ready to receive it. So what are you doing with your gift is what my sponsor would say. What are you doing with the precious thing called sobriety? Are you trying to hold it for yourself? Because if you do, we got the great paradox in Alcoholics Anonymous. In order to keep it, I got to give it away. So what are you doing to give it away? Right? And that's really been my journey for the last, 31 years. Right? My first 5 years, I was just kind of like a home group flunky, basically, doing nothing, cleaning up here, making coffee there. Right? But what are you doing with your gift today? And, I think a lot of this comes down to sponsorship. I kind of look at myself as like a lunch pail, blue-collar guy. I'm like a union sponsor. I keep it really simple with the guys I work with. Get a job in the group, get a commitment in the group, get tethered to Alcoholics Anonymous. Let's work the steps, right? Peter talked earlier about empathy, God's empathy. When he said that earlier on, and I think he went into 6 and 7, he said something, but when he said God's empathy is what we need in Alcoholics Anonymous, that's the first thing I looked at. The 12 traditions. Because it all starts with a group. Right? How are we going to meet Alcoholics Anonymous? Alcoholics. We're going to meet them at groups. We're going to meet them in meetings. And how do we sponsor people? Well, we meet them in our meetings. Right? So I started to understand that the group is probably the most important thing that we have. More important than our own physical sobriety, believe it or not. Bill writes that in Tradition 1, that the unity of AA is more important than anything. Without AA, where are we going? Where are you going? I have nowhere to go without Alcoholics Anonymous. I won't survive very long. That's my track record. So step 12 isn't about convincing anyone that they need this program. What we're really doing is demonstrating through our own sobriety what AA has done for us. We carry the message to the best of our ability. And again, we go to all different places to do that. So we do that through sponsorship. We do that through watching the door, waiting for that newcomer to come in. One of the biggest things that I think are most important things as a sponsor in carrying a message and helping someone is really teaching them about what Alcoholics Anonymous is and what Alcoholics Anonymous isn't. This is not a dating center. This is not a place where you're going to find a job, though you might. AA etiquette was really important in my early years. I'm glad for the old timers that sat me down and really talked. Peter talked a little bit about this. The kindness of strangers, the men who took time out to explain what this is really about to me. I used to make fun of the guys that I got sober with. They were really old. They were like 45 years old. I was 29 years old. And I make a joke of that because we didn't have big book meetings like we do today. Not in my neighborhood anyway, right? But these men, and the joke I used to say is these guys don't know the difference between a phone book and a big book. But if you needed help, these men would be on your porch. They would be at your house. They would go to any length to help you to make sure that you're okay, right? And they would sit me down and they would teach me about AA etiquette. Imagine that. Imagine coming to a meeting a half hour early. Wow. And leave a half hour later. Wow. Right? How about thanking the speaker after he speaks, even if you don't like the talk that he gave? My home group is ginormous. And everything that the speakers always say when they come to my group is not so much the group. All they talk about is they can't believe how many people line up to say thank you. Now, we don't know how to do that without a sponsor showing us or teaching us that stuff. All right? So just those kind of things. AA etiquette, how to be a member of a group, getting a job in a group, practicing the traditions. I just wrote down a few things that the old timers used to tell me. Having that conversation. We think that working with others, when we read that's about sponsorship. I don't look at it like that at all. I think working with others is how to meet the drunk where he's at. How do you have a conversation with someone who doesn't know what AA is all about? Or maybe does know what AA is about and is totally lost. Do you know how to do that? Do you know how to do a 12-step call? Do you know how to sit down and qualify the drunk, meet the drunk where he's at? Every sponsor I had, it was so important that they did something that I could never do for myself. They got into the hole with me. They didn't stand above me and tell me how to get out. They climbed in the hole and they showed me how to get out of the hole through their own experience, through their own actions. I've had 5 sponsors in 36 and a half years. Richie Schnorr was my first one, the guy that 12-stepped me. 5 years I had him. And these men were all different. They were all different and the same, if that makes even sense. They all loved Alcoholics Anonymous. They still do love Alcoholics Anonymous because they're not all dead, thank God. But it's early yet, so still got to get back to the airport tomorrow. But I had this guy Richie, 5 years. He was my sponsor, and he's the one that 12-stepped me in again. I remember I had the most important question in the world. I had to ask him one day. How do you not go to a baseball game and get loaded? How do you not have fun? How do you not go to barbecues? How do you not go to the lake or the beach or a concert? How do you do that stuff? And he didn't tell me how to do that. He showed me how to do that. He would have parties at his house. He would have barbecues at his house. Picnics we'd go on. He showed me that Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship that we crave is not about, being dumb, boring, and glum like it says about in the vision with you, for you, right? That there's a life here to have. And in doing so, we get to carry the message and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Bill Grace, I talked about him earlier. Year 5, he became my sponsor. Bill Grace was as big as me. Came from St. Paul, Minnesota. Had a blue book. He came into my town. He was a man that was on with the facts. He had a message of depth and weight. And the old-timers were afraid of him. We had business meetings where the old-timers would tell us young guys, stay away from that guy. He's going to kill you. They were threatened by his sobriety. Now, that sounds absolutely ludicrous saying it, but that's just the way it was in my neighborhood back then because they felt threatened, or maybe they felt fear, or maybe they just realized they weren't doing anything but just not drinking and going to meetings and buying into that lie that abstinence is a solution to a spiritual malady. But Bill Grace, he picked up a drink at 16 years. He's the first guy that took me through the book. He had full-blown AIDS. And back in the 80s, for those who were around, there was no cure for AIDS back then. And he started to get all the lesions all over him. And he probably withered down to about 120 pounds at 6'4". Looked like a pencil. He was skinny as a rail. And I loved this guy. But he gave up hope. And he wound up drinking, and I think he was shooting dope at the end, and he died. But that doesn't dismiss everything he did for me, of carrying a message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And then I had this old timer, RDB, for like 9 years. My dad was a butcher, you know, and I told you earlier on all the trouble I had with my father. Me and my old man, we were like this my whole life until I got sober. And when I was sober and, you know, he came to my 90-day celebration, he met you. And he was so happy, though he couldn't express that happiness and how he felt about Alcoholics Anonymous and what you were doing for his son. I know deep down inside he was proud of what was going on in my life, that my life was getting transformed. Even though, you know, I mean, I was only a few months sober, but he saw a difference. And when he died, my old man, like I told you just now, you know, I moved down to the Jersey Shore and I'm looking for a sponsor. And I hear this old timer and he sounds pretty good. He was about 60 years old back then. He was 30 years something sober. He just died, you know, I don't even know, 6 months ago, a year ago, with 57 years of sobriety. And I remember, like, I don't know, I felt this incredible fear about asking him to help me. But then one day I walked to him, I said, what do you do for a living? He goes, I'm a butcher. Damn, God, stop showing off. And he became my sponsor for about 9 years until I really went sideways at 10 years of sobriety. Because you see, I'm not that guy that got on a spiritual rocket ship when I got here and went up, and away. My recovery is about growing, hitting a wall, growing, hitting a wall. And I think that's the story for most of us. That we all have that second surrender, that third surrender, that fourth surrender. And I think we hit a lot of walls. But we stay close to Alcoholics Anonymous, we stay close to our sponsors, we stay close to God, and we get through the things that we get through. And then I met Petey Boy. I blow up my life at 10 years. I almost drink at 13 years. I walk into a bar at 13 years sober. I'm living a double life in Alcoholics Anonymous, though I don't want you guys to know about it because I'm an AA guru, and I'm, I walk into a bar because I'm living this double life. Lying to my sponsor, lying to everyone, walked out of a marriage, all that stuff. Walked into a bar one night in Red Bank, New Jersey. I said, bartender, give me a drink. He put the drink on the bar. I understand what Dr. Bob talks about in his nightmare when he says we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I didn't want to take that drink, but God damn it, I needed that drink. And when the devil and the angel popped out on my shoulder, they said, drink it, don't drink it, drink it, don't drink it. And all of a sudden a hand went around that glass and pulled that glass back. And when I looked up, the bartender just happened to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. What are you doing in here? Well, apparently throwing my life away. And 2 weeks later, and this just to show you the emergence of ego, I walk into a workshop that he's doing. I never knew this guy, never met this guy, never heard this guy. And I'm in there and I'm judging him because he sounds too good to be true. 2 weeks earlier, I'm ready to drink, and now I'm here judging him. And the way he likes to put it, but I think it's really the way I see it, it was I walked up nicely and asked him to sponsor me. I think he says I put him in a headlock and said, you're going to sponsor me now. Something like that. We never get clear of that story. But that starts my journey for the next 15 to 16, 17 years with him. Right? And we're like brothers now, and there was a point where I needed a new voice in my head. It wasn't about him. It was just me. I just wanted to grow a little bit. And he was a little surprised. I was even surprised. I was afraid to talk to him, to be honest with you. But I'll show you how God works. So I called 3 guys in the country and say, I'm thinking about a new sponsor. I had a guy in mind, but I didn't tell anyone. All 3 of them gave me the same answer. All 3 of them don't even live 1,000 miles from each other. They had no idea. And Bob B became my sponsor. Bob Bazance from St. Paul, Minnesota, who's sober 55 years right now. Bob B, he's a different kind of guy. He's just different than anyone else. And Bob's not about mechanics or any of that. Bob's about, let's just sit down and have a conversation. Let's just talk. Right? And here comes full circle how God connects the dots. Peter's looking for a sponsor. And he calls me up and says, I'm thinking about asking Bob. So now my old sponsor is now my sober brother. And something like that. You know how that. We're like the wayward family or something. You know, just like, but they've all done one thing for me. They insist on carrying a message to the alcoholic who still suffers. You've had a spiritual experience as a result of these 12 steps. You've stepped into the sunlight of the Spirit. Now you need to give this away in abundance. You know, and that's really been my story. I've been involved in a lot of things through the years. But a couple of things that all these men, if I put it all together, you know, some of the things they really talked about was just having that conversation, working with others, the obligation. When I start sponsoring guys, the mutual expectations we have for each other, I'm not here to be your sober coach. I'm not here to be your father. I'm not here to be any of that stuff. I'm your sponsor. I'm just another guy who's been through the 12 steps who's trying to carry the message to you so you could have this still awakened life and help others. I mean, it's really simple. I mean, I'm like the total AA for dummies type of guy, I think it's really important that we share our experience, our strength, and our hope. I'm not a counselor, never been in the field. I know nothing about that stuff, but I used to learn what this guy Artie was, and he used to talk about the 3 E's. That one I need to explain, one I need to encourage, and one I need to engage. And explain is really just about our basic concepts, what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. Why do we expect a newcomer when he walks in to know what we're doing? We don't. So we have a different language in here. It's called the language of the heart. So we need to really start sitting down and talking about our basic concepts. Why is that basket going around? Well, we always make a joke. He told that joke a little earlier about, that his uncle, well, maybe it was a private joke and you guys weren't in on it, so I'm not going to tell you. But it was basically, we're all kind of like shady sometimes, when we get here. And like, where's that money basket going? Who's that guy, that's holding that? But just the basic concepts of Alcoholics Anonymous, the encouragement. I was always encouraged to read our literature. This is really our sponsor, right? This is really our sponsor, all our literature. Everything we need to know is in our literature. What we get from our sponsors and what we get from each other is our experience, strength, and hope when you apply these principles to all your affairs and what that looks like. What does it look like to make amends, like we heard tonight from Freddie? What does it look like to write inventory? What does it look like to, pray and meditate? What does it look like to get on your knees with another person and take that third step prayer? And then engage. I was always told to engage in all 3 sides of the triangle. We can get very top-heavy in fellowship. We could become AA ninjas, like it was said. We could become militant in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's a dangerous place, but I think we all go through a little phase of that at some point or another. I know I did. I know after I went through the steps the first time, the first thing I did was I went to Harlem, New York, and I saw Joe and Charlie for the first time. And I came back from Harlem, and I'll tell you, I was like hitting people all over the head with this book. You better do this stuff. I wasn't doing it, but you better do it, that kind of thing. And we have to learn about that stuff. We have to tone that stuff down. That's not effective. Here's the question: am I useful and effective in carrying a message? Never take advantage of a sponsee, whether it's financially, sexually, or try to control them. I got one job, is to get you independent of me and dependent upon God. That's it. And we do that through our sharing our experience, strength, and our hope. We do that through carrying this message. And so you think I was going to talk about a spiritual experience, but this is the accumulation of what we do. Step 12 of carrying this message. 2006, I'm sitting in my house, or a little prior to that, we're talking to my wife, Mary Beth, who was up here earlier. We like to start a big book meeting down by my house. We belong to separate home groups. And we said, we want to start a big book meeting where we can carry the message to people in our neighborhood, to make it. There was no big book meeting per se in our neighborhood. So I got 12 guys from all different groups, invited them to my house, and we put a steering committee together. And like Bill Wilson hammering out on the anvil of experience when he wrote the traditions, we used the experience of all these other men and women that were at our house to create a format so we could start this meeting in our neighborhood. I'll never forget when we wrote this format out, and we had the church that we wanted to go to. I'll never forget this night till the day I die. We went to prayer. And we prayed that 30 people would show up at our home group on day 1. That first night, we had over 175 people at our group. We had tables, well, we had round tables, but we were like, we're going to ditch the tables. We need more chairs, And 18 years later, we'll be celebrating 18 years as a home group this January on the Jersey Shore, Neptune, New Jersey, a Design for Living group. And any day, on any Sunday, given Sunday, we could have 200 to 300 people in that room. A pocket of enthusiasm. Are you excited about your sobriety? I know when I get to my go home group, I see excitement in the air. I feel the pocket of enthusiasm. We walk in, and I know some girls from another group that broke off from us, and they're the same way. There's 2 girls reading over there the book. There's 2 guys over there. There's the guys around the coffee pot talking about, again, the Giants beating the Eagles. There's excitement. There's spirit. You can walk in, because I know you guys have walked into meetings where it feels like the night of the living dead, where there's no juice going on. No juice going on. And at 2007, we decided to become a group. I'm 19 years sober at the time. And in order to be a group, we need a GSR to keep our group attached or connected to Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. So we're not the type of group where if you go to the bathroom and you come out the GSR, that we don't do that. But they asked me to be the GSR. I don't want to do service work. I don't know nothing about service work. I know nothing about that side of the triangle. No clue. But I reluctantly put my hand up. All right, I'll do it. It was all fear. I'm afraid of what you think of me if I don't do a good job. See how that thing is still in me? That thing is still in me. Those feelings of insecurity, those feelings I don't fit in, those feelings I can't do the job. I mean, the list is from here to the back wall. I have why I can't do what I can do. But I raise my hand and I say, I'll do it. That next month, I went to a regional service assembly in Hunt Valley, Maryland. 1,000 people. It's called Narassa. And I walk in there and I'm overwhelmed with people. And I feel like a square peg in a round hole, 19 years sober. Coming up on my 20th year of sobriety. And I am like riddled with fear. Hundreds of forms of fear in this big hotel. And then I met 2 guys, 2 old-timers. 2 guys, one became my service sponsor. His name's John Q. And if you can, pray for him, because he's in the hospital. And, you know, our elders are getting old. He's not going to last too much longer. And John Q was just I thought he was just an old dude from the neighborhood. But he was a past trustee, and he was a past United States trustee at large, which means that he was the connector. He was the liaison between our structure, AA in the United States and Canada, and all the structures in the world. One guy does that. And there's one person in Canada that does that. And the other guy was a bar owner, and he was our Northeast trustee. And they took me under their wing. And I'll tell you why I'm telling this long, drawn-out story. John hands me the service manual. I don't know if anyone ever read the service manual in here. It's a real doozy. But all he wants me to do is read one thing in there. In the old manual, it's on S20. I don't know what page it's on in the new manual. And there's a title, there's an excerpt in there from a non-alcoholic, Class A we call them, non-alcoholic trustee. His name was Bernard Smith. He was Bill Wilson's personal lawyer. He's the guy that created our general service structure along with Bill. And what he writes in there, or what the excerpt is why do we have a general service conference? Why do we do the things we do in Alcoholics Anonymous? And in that little excerpt, he writes this. We don't do what we do in AA to ensure our sobriety. We're all here right now. I know when people show up in Florida at Peter's group, he knows what to do with that newcomer. I know you girls over there know what to do when that girl shows up and sit her down and help her out and get her on the path, right? But what he writes is right now. In Doylestown, Pennsylvania, there's a man right now. I'm guaranteeing you right now. He's cracking open a bottle of Jack Daniels. And he's ready to wash his day away. And he has no clue whatsoever, because there's a bunch of guys in here that have an answer to his problem. I'm guaranteeing you right now, in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, there's a single mom who can't wait to put those 3 kids down and crack that bottle of wine open and just wash her day away, not knowing there's a bunch of beautiful women in this room right now that have an answer to our problem. Right now. Right now. In your local hospital, and 120 miles away where I live, and every hospital in between, there's a baby being born destined for alcoholism. So we all have a responsibility. I learned I have a responsibility. And what that responsibility is to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And yeah, we could talk about sponsorship, we could talk about sitting at the table, we could talk about bringing someone through the steps, and we all know that's vitally important. That's why we talked about that all day long. But there's other ways of carrying a message to alcoholics who are still suffering, who don't know we exist in the rooms of AA. And we do that going through treatment centers, we do that going to our prison systems, we do that going to detoxes, we go to our doctors, we go to our clergy, we carry the message to the best of our ability. We try to practice these principles in all our affairs and bring the word out to them. Elimination of our drinking is just the beginning. A more important demonstration of our principles lies in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. How you doing with that, as my sponsors would say to me? How you doing with that, Jim? So I started to learn that I need to do a little bit more as an individual member in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't take on the world. I do my part. We all have a part. And so I got involved. And I started to work down my service structure. We have an inverted triangle. The groups are on top. The groups are in charge of Alcoholics Anonymous. I started to work my way down. I became a DCM. I became an alternate chair. I became the chairperson, became an alternate delegate. And then I just rotated out last December as the delegate to the General Service Conference for Area 44. Big whoop-de-doo. And I'm proud of that. But that's not my purpose. My purpose is to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. So when you're involved in service at that level, you're making decisions for Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. When it comes to our pamphlets, some people walk in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, have no clue what this is about. They get to the pamphlet and they don't want to talk to any of you guys because they're afraid. But they go to that literature table and all of a sudden they see a pamphlet that might apply to them. And they pick up that pamphlet and they say, you know what? Maybe there is hope for a guy like me or a woman like me. So we need to stock our literature tables. Why? Because that's a way of carrying a message to the alcoholic who still suffers. My 2 years, I'm going to wrap it up with this in a little bit. My 2 years of service as a delegate. My first conference was virtual. 8 days, 10 hours on a computer, vertigo the whole time. You know how dizzy I was on my first talk? I mean, I had that for a week. But my second was in Brooklyn, at the Marriott down in Brooklyn Heights. And I'm the closest living delegate at that time to the General Service Conference, even closer than the guy that's a delegate from New York, Sini. And I make a decision to just drive in. I mean, what else would I do? I'd just drive into Brooklyn and go to this conference. As I drove into Brooklyn, I grew up in Jersey City, got sober in Jersey City, which is on the Jersey side of the Hudson River. So I had to go through Jersey City. So I said to myself, you know what, let me just take a ride through my old neighborhood. And I drove through my old neighborhood. And all these emotions started to flare up in me. This feeling of gratitude, this feeling of purpose. I'm going to do a job for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm trying to carry the message because of the spiritual awakening. I get to carry the message to the best of my ability to represent my area, to represent my groups, to represent the people that are lives are on the brink sometimes. And as I drove through those streets where I would walk aimlessly at night for 18 months with no direction, I passed that house I grew up in where there was such violence sometimes, where my old man would just be off the chain. And I just couldn't wait to get away from him. I passed that first bar I drank in, Wally's. Back then the drinking age was 18, but if your chin could hit the bar, you were getting served. So I was getting served like 15 years old. Because I was born 6'4". My mother got through it, don't worry. The joy of living is the theme of the 12th step. How will you live in your life in Alcoholics Anonymous? Are we just not drinking and going to meetings? Are we just hanging our hat on sponsorship, which is important? And not everyone needs to get in service either. I'm not saying that. But what part are you doing to carry the message to the person who is still sick and suffering? And what lengths are you going to do that? I had 90 days sober. In Jersey, we don't do the chips, the coins. We do a 90-day pinning and a yearly pinning. I don't never forget this day, my only 90-day celebration I ever had. And see, when you had 90 days, they used to have a triangle in New Jersey. I don't know if we have that. Some groups still do. It's a gold triangle with a G on top, a dot in the middle, and AA on the bottom. And what would happen on the 90 days, you'd get on a jacket and tie. They were pretty adamant about showing up dressed at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. As he always says, don't show up like you just committed a felony. Be dressed. Show respect for the life that you've been given because of Alcoholics Anonymous. And see, the sponsor would stand up there and he'd say, hey, Jim, see this little insignificant dot in the middle of that triangle? That's you. But I want to make you a promise. Same promise I'm making to anyone in this room tonight. Whether you have 30 minutes, 30 years, 30 days, it doesn't make a difference. Because we know from experience that you could be dying in here with 30 years of sobriety, but your ego and your pride has now stepped into place and you're not talking to anyone about any of that stuff. And the pandemic has made that even worse because we've isolated. We've gotten behind the screen. Not knocking virtual meetings, but it's real easy just to hide behind the screen and not be eyeball to eyeball with each other. But here's the promise that they made me and the promise that I make you. If you could put one hand in G, which is God, and one hand in AA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, and get involved with our 3 legacies of unity, service, and recovery, you'll never have a hand to pick up a drink. And in doing so, we get to carry the principles. We can practice these principles. We have a spiritual experience, and we get to live a life that, as I've heard from a million podiums, beyond our wildest dreams. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you again, Jimmy. Incredible talk from all our speakers tonight. It's been an amazing day, and thank you for your service coming here. And if you get a chance, thank them. I don't know what we're going to do is we'll say a prayer. Let's say the Our Father real quick, and then if you care to join us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Yeah, the night meeting goes on tonight at 8 p.m. I guess 8 p.m. food and fellowship, 8:30 speaker. If you guys want to go out and grab some dinner and get a break, unless you guys want to sit here and do open mic and rotate speakers until then, you're welcome to do that. All conference talks will be on YouTube.